Boris Johnson, the former PM, at the COVID inquiry.
Right, so what did you make of his performance? He did become emotional on the first day. I think a lot of people forget what he himself went through with the disease, so it'd be interesting to see what you think.
Yeah, well, I definitely did. I mean, I was listening to him at the COVID inquiry on the radio, and he was talking at that time about his time in ICU, and you do forget that he was in intensive care. I mean, it was touch and go at one point, I do think. But not all of you were buying his expressions of remorse. So we're going to be talking about that this morning. We've got Alex Armstrong here on the sofa with us. And Alex, just before we come to you, let's just remind ourselves of what Boris Johnson said at the inquiry this week.
Do you know why your phone was missing those 5,000 odd WhatsApps?
I don't know the exact reason, but it looks as though it's something to do with the app going down and then coming up again, but somehow not. I understand the feelings of these victims and their families, and I am deeply sorry for the pain and the loss and the suffering of those victims and their families. What I'm trying to tell you, in a nutshell, and the NHS, thank God, did an amazing job and helped me survive. But I knew from that experience what an appalling disease this is.
As Boris Johnson, former Prime Minister, giving evidence at the COVID inquiry this week. Alex Armstrong joins us now on the sofa. He's a political commentator. Alex, what did you make of Boris Johnson's answers at the COVID inquiry?
I think it was a really humanising moment for Boris. You know, I know a lot of people watching it went through COVID. I had COVID twice. It's horrendous. I can't even imagine what it's like for a lot of people who had it. And just seeing him get quite emotional, you know, we haven't seen that side of him for a long time, I think, since he was Prime Minister. It was very professional. So seeing him come out with that emotion was quite touching, in my opinion. I know a lot of people disagree. But, you know, I think it's difficult when you're having the whole thing pinned on you to not feel a sense of responsibility and I think for people watching it must have been quite emotional for them. A lot of them lost loved ones. And Boris, as he said, he was in ICU himself. So it was really quite a powerful moment. I think it will be the one thing people take away from the whole inquiry will be Boris's time on there. But yeah, I did feel very emotional watching it. I don't know about you guys. What did you think?
I was quite struck by the emotion as well, but I think I had forgotten, really, his own battle with COVID, and I found that did find that quite moving, that he was getting choked up at his experience. It must have been quite scary. If we just take him as a human and not as a politician, being in ICU, feeling as though it was touch and go, whether you're going to survive or not, and then also trying to lead the country at the same time, I think it was the first time I'd actually taken that on board as how difficult that must have been as a human. What do you think?
Yeah, and it's easy to see things in hindsight. You might say, well, it was obvious what was right and what was wrong. But I think you don't know that until you've been through it. It's really difficult to not have some emotion for someone who went through it. I mean, you said you had it twice, right? Yeah. I had it 4 times. Yeah. 3 times after I was vaccinated, which was bizarre, but I had it 4 times. And, you know, you think about when you've been through it or you've lost someone or you've, had someone in ICU, you're going to have a different view on it and a different emotion. So in that side, yes, but there are people saying that he sort of rehearsed it and, yeah.
I mean, he definitely is going to rehearse it, right? I mean, you've got millions of people watching it. I don't think that takes away from your natural response. You know, I think there maybe was a bit of nonsense with the WhatsApp stuff. You know, I've heard relatively good with technology, so I don't know how much I believe those WhatsApp messages went missing. But, you know, on the human side of things, I think it was really hard. Obviously, he got heckled as well. I don't know if you saw that. I mean, that must be difficult. You know, you're getting millions of people listening to you and you're getting heckled by people who've lost a loved one. So I think that's tough.
I do think it's really important to reflect that, actually, that he was being heckled in the room. There were grieving families, who went in and very quietly held up placards, and they were placards and photos of their families' loved ones that they lost during COVID, and on the placards it says they can't hear your apology. And we do need to remember those people, don't we, who, for them, an apology is never, ever going to be enough.
No, it's not. I think that's exactly right. And, you know, when you've lost a loved one, no apology's ever going to make up for that, is it?
I mean, OK, so let's put it, say for the fact someone else was going to be in power at that time. Who would have got everything right? Maybe they would have got some of the things that Boris didn't get right, but there would have been other things they would have got wrong. I mean, it was the first time this had ever happened, right? So it is difficult to sort of pin everything on just one person.
Yeah, it's unprecedented, isn't it? There was no rule book, there was no playbook on how to do this, and anyone who's ever been in government or politics will tell you the same thing. It's always chaotic, and I think what this inquiry is doing is really focusing on the politicians and not really on what happened and what we could have done better as a country and what we could do now. This whole inquiry is costing us a lot of money, you know, topping up 100 million. So I think we're starting to get into this sort of, you know, attacking politicians rather than attacking what really happened. And so I think for Boris, this is a really hard thing to relive. And I really feel the public are going to start to see a different side to him. You know, I think he did a really good job under the circumstances.
I mean, you've got the other side of it too, where, yes, the lockdowns may have worked to help the vulnerable, but then you had the other side of it where mental health became a huge problem. Yeah. People sitting there at GCSEs, you know, my son was sitting it through that time, and the difficulty of that, domestic abuse, all these other things that were just becoming huge on the other side. So we're trying to solve one problem, and then on the other side, there's all these other problems emerging.
Yeah, and I think the public want to hear about that. I want to hear about it. I want to hear what we could do better. I know I've got 4 younger brothers, and I know they really struggled during the lockdown. They had to do all their lessons on Zoom. I hate Zoom, so I can only imagine what it's like for these kids who've got, you know, lower attention spans to sit there and do that all day. You know, feel for them.
Yeah, and it is interesting. I mean, you talk there about already we're topping 100 million on this COVID inquiry. Lots of people would say that money would be better spent trying to fix the damage, as you say, Pete, towards those who have suffered with mental health and other sorts of illnesses as a result of the lockdowns. Look, also on the sofa, we've got Charlie Rowley and the broadcaster, life coach and author Jenny Trent Hughes. So, Charlie Rowley, I want to come to you first because you were the former advisor to Michael Gove, who also has given evidence at the COVID inquiry. So what is your opinion on the inquiry so far? I mean, it's been going on for a very long time and it's cost over 100 million. Do you think it's worth it?
I do, and I think it's look, it's due to run until about 2026, so we've got a bit of a way to go in this inquiry. But I think, look, for the families and people that have lost their lives, and for everybody that you were talking about, people that suffered mental health illness, people who had to do their lessons on Zoom and are still feeling the effects of the catch-up there, people who were self-employed businesses, people who weren't able to do their day-to-day jobs, who have been and found just being locked down. You know, families have broken up, people have changed in themselves. So I think there's a whole a piece of work that needs to happen to make sure that we get to the bottom of the decisions that were taken that were wrong, decisions that were taken where the processes that were in place were not sufficient enough to make the right decisions, the personalities. We've seen through all the WhatsApp messages, which are, you know, incredible, actually. You know, they fall way below the standard that's expected of anybody in public life, particularly if you're serving at the highest level. And so all of those things, it's a cocktail of confusion and, you know, disaster, basically, if you get the wrong decision because of all of those factors. But that's why the inquiry, I think, is so important. And I think, look, you know, credit to Hugo Keith, the KC that's leading this whole thing, who is box office, if you ask me. He's brilliant to watch. He is absolutely brilliant to watch. But he is absolutely holding the right people to account, including Michael Gove. You rightly said he was on The Stand last week, Boris this week. Matt Hancock has to come back, I think, again. And we've got Rishi, the current Prime Minister, next week, who was obviously the Chancellor at the time that introduced schemes like Eat Out to Help Out, the furlough scheme, things that were deemed very good, but have they had a detrimental effect? We'll have to wait and see.
Charlie, you've segued us so beautifully onto the next story, which is Eat Out to Help Out, because, of course, Rishi Sunak going to be giving evidence on Monday. Jenny, what do you make of what you've heard so far, and what do you think we can expect from Rishi Sunak on Monday?
Well, I have been absolutely, you know, everybody's watching I'm a Celebrity. I'm listening to this. I'm the only person I actually haven't listened to was Michael Gove. I've always had a bit of a soft spot for Boris, so I thought he handled himself very well. I think that in comparison to people like Matt Hancock, which if I didn't live on a boat in Warwickshire, I would have been down there with a placard, he really annoyed me. I thought that Boris was actually quite honest because he said, I don't remember, I don't know, I thought maybe this, and in retrospect, I was wrong. And I actually thought he handled himself really, really well. And as far as WhatsApp go, I'm not a WhatsApp fan, but have you ever looked back on your own WhatsApps? Would any of us want our WhatsApps being... No, we just wouldn't.
The abuse I've had from Ellie on WhatsApp is unbelievable.
Off your WhatsApp.
You know, diagrams, we were all talking filth, pictures of miscellaneous body parts. You know, nobody wants to share their
Your WhatsApp sounds great. I want to get in on that.
You know, I'm sorry.
Jenny, do tell us.
Yes. Now, what do I expect from Rishi on Monday? Right now, Rishi's on my naughty step getting a piece of coal for Christmas list over Rwanda. So I'm going to be watching gleefully on Monday to watch him try to tap dance his way out of Eat Out to Help Out, which was... because when I first heard it, I honestly thought it was a joke. They must be kidding. People are going to go out. Everybody's going to get us sick again. This is the stupidest thing I've ever heard of.
OK.
So,
well, we want to know more about your WhatsApp messages later.